quiet suburban street held its breath as Caitlin Griffin stood on the porch. 3 infants pressed against her chest, their cries swallowed by the cold night air. Inside, Owen Brooks didn't raise his voice anymore. He didn't need to. His silence, backed by Margaret Brooks's thin smile and Lydia's watchful eyes, was enough. The door closed with finality, locking Caitlin out under the gaze of neighbors who chose not to intervene. In her pocket, her phone lit up once unseen. They believed she had nothing left. They were already wrong. If you believe dignity should never be negotiated, stay with this story until the end. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. And if stories of quiet strength and justice matter to you, consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Long before the door closed on her, Caitlin Griffin had learned how to stand still in places where movement only made things worse. It was not a skill she had been born with. It was something she acquired gradually, almost invisibly shaped by rooms where conversations shifted without warning, and by people who measured worth in ways that rarely aligned with truth. By the time she married Owen Brooks, Caitlin had already understood that silence, when used correctly, was not absence. It was structure. It was timing. It was restraint. Owen hadn't noticed that about her. He met her 3 years earlier at a regional infrastructure conference in Chicago, a setting filled with polished shoes, confident handshakes, and conversations built on projections and numbers. Caitlin had been there on a short-term consulting contract, assisting a smaller firm that specialized in risk evaluation for large-scale bids. She was not introduced as anything significant. Her role, as far as anyone could see, was administrative. Owen saw something else, though, not in the way that would have mattered. He noticed her composure first, the way she listened without interrupting, the way she asked one question at the exact moment it could not be ignored. He mistook that for quiet support, for adaptability, for someone who would not challenge him. At the time, that was enough. Their relationship moved quickly. Owen's life was already structured, anchored by his position at Brooks Infrastructure Group, a company his family treated as both legacy and leverage. His mother, Margaret Brooks, had spent years reinforcing the belief that stability came from control. His younger sister, Lydia, had inherited that belief and sharpened it into something more precise, more cutting. Caitlin entered that environment without resistance. At first, she was received with polite acceptance. Margaret approved of her appearance, her calm demeanor, the absence of any obvious demands. Lydia remained observant, less welcoming, but not yet openly dismissive. Owen seemed satisfied. He spoke of the future with confidence, describing expansions contracts and opportunities that would elevate the family's standing. Caitlin listened. She did not correct him when he misinterpreted details. She did not insert herself into conversations where her knowledge would have shifted the balance. She let the assumptions form around her unchallenged. It was easier that way, at least in the beginning. After the wedding, the house became her primary setting. A wide, well-lit property in a suburban development outside Boston, with carefully maintained landscaping and rooms arranged to reflect order rather than comfort. Margaret visited often, sometimes unannounced. Lydia came and went with equal familiarity, her presence sharp enough to alter the tone of any space she entered. Caitlin adapted. She organized the home without drawing attention to it. She learned the rhythms of Owen's schedule, the expectations of his mother, the subtle signals that indicated when conversation was safe and when it was better left untouched. She made herself useful in ways that did not require acknowledgement. What no one in that house understood was that Caitlin had not stopped working. Her laptop remained closed most of the time, tucked away in a drawer in the study. Her phone, when it rested on the kitchen counter or beside the couch, appeared ordinary, used for messages and occasional calls. But beneath that surface, her connections remained active. Former colleagues reached out. Smaller firms, then larger ones, requested her input on risk assessments, bid structures, and contract vulnerabilities. Caitlin accepted only what she could manage without disruption. She worked in fragments of time. Early mornings before Owen woke. Late evenings after the house settled into silence. Her notes were precise, structured in a way that allowed her to return to them without losing context. She tracked figures, timelines, and clauses with a level of detail that made her contributions difficult to replace, even if her name was rarely attached to the final documents. The payments were consistent, but not visible. They moved through accounts that did not intersect with the Brooks household finances. To Owen and his family, Caitlin remained financially dependent. That perception, once established, was never questioned. Then the triplets were born. The pregnancy had not been easy. By the third trimester, Caitlin's movements were slower, her energy carefully rationed. Owen adjusted his schedule, briefly present in ways that suggested obligation rather than understanding. Margaret increased her visits, her tone shifting from polite oversight to direct instruction. Lydia's commentary became more frequent, often delivered with a lightness that did little to soften its intent. "You'll need help," Margaret said one afternoon, standing in the nursery before it was fully prepared. 3 infants at once isn't something you can manage alone. Caitlin nodded. "I understand." It was the kind of response that invited no further discussion. After the birth, the house changed. 3 newborns introduced a rhythm that could not be controlled by preference. Sleep became fragmented. Time compressed. Caitlin moved through the days with quiet efficiency, feeding, holding, adjusting, repeating. She learned the differences in each child's cry, the small variations that signaled discomfort, hunger, or fatigue. Owen returned to work quickly. His absence was not explained in detail. It did not need to be. His focus, as he described it, was on an upcoming project that required full attention. The stakes were high, the potential return significant. He spoke about it during dinners, his tone confident, his expectations clear. Caitlin listened, even when she was too tired to respond. Margaret's visits became inspections. She commented on the arrangement of bottles, the timing of feedings, the condition of the house. Her observations were framed as guidance, but the underlying message was consistent. Caitlin was not meeting a standard that had never been clearly defined. "You look exhausted," Lydia remarked one evening, leaning against the doorway as Caitlin held 2 of the babies at once. "This is why people plan these things more carefully." Caitlin adjusted her grip, steadying both infants. "They're healthy," she said. "That's not the point," Lydia replied, her voice light. "Sustainability matters." The word lingered longer than necessary. Owen did not intervene. When he was present, he avoided conflict by redirecting conversations. When that failed, he remained silent. His distance was subtle at first, expressed through shorter responses, delayed returns home, and an increasing focus on his phone during the limited time he spent in the same room. Caitlin noticed. She also noticed what he did not say. The gaps between his explanations. The way certain names appeared more frequently in his messages, even if he did not mention them aloud. She did not confront him. Confrontation required acknowledgement, and acknowledgement would have changed the timing. Instead, she documented. A notebook appeared in the drawer beside her bed. Nothing elaborate, just dates, times, and brief descriptions, conversations, comments, absences, the kind of details that seemed insignificant in isolation but gained weight when placed together. She recorded without emotion. Late one night, as the house settled into a rare moment of quiet, Caitlin sat at the small desk in the corner of the bedroom. One of the babies slept against her shoulder. The other 2 rested in their cribs, their breathing steady. Her phone lit up. The notification was simple. An email. The sender's name appeared clearly on the screen, Halverson Capital Partners. Caitlin looked at it for a moment. There had been ongoing communication over the past few months, each exchange more detailed than the last. a proposal, revisions, risk assessments, final adjustments. The scale of the project had been significant even by the standards she was accustomed to. This email was different. It carried a subject line that suggested conclusion. She did not open it. Instead, she turned the phone face down on the desk and reached for her notebook. She wrote the date, the time, a brief note indicating the arrival of the message. Then she closed the notebook and sat in silence. Across the house, Owen was still awake. His voice carried faintly through the walls, low and measured, speaking to someone. Caitlin could not see. The tone was not the same as it had been before. There was a lightness to it, a familiarity that had not been present in their recent conversations. Caitlin did not move toward the sound. She remained where she was, one hand resting lightly on the child against her shoulder, the other placed on the edge of the desk. The unopened email remained within reach, its contents unchanged by her decision to wait. Outside, the neighborhood was still. Lights dimmed behind closed curtains. Cars parked in driveways, unmoving. The kind of quiet that suggested stability, even when it was only surface deep. Inside, the balance had already begun to shift. No one in the house recognized it yet. The house had a way of amplifying small tensions until they settled into something permanent. By the time the triplets were 3 months old, the rhythm inside the Brooks home had hardened into routine. Not a comfortable one, not a balanced one, but something predictable enough that each person moved through it without asking whether it worked. Caitlin Griffin adjusted without announcement. She woke before the first cry fully formed. She moved through dim hallways without turning on unnecessary lights. She fed, changed, soothed, and repeated her motions, efficient, deliberate. Never rushed, even when time pressed against her. The exhaustion showed in small ways, the slight delay before she stood, the quiet exhale when she sat down, the way her shoulders held tension, even in stillness. Margaret Brooks noticed those things. "You're slowing down," she said one morning, standing at the kitchen counter while Caitlin prepared bottles. The comment was delivered without hostility, but not without judgment either. That's what happens when there's no structure. Caitlin kept her focus on the measurements. "They're on a schedule," she replied. Margaret's gaze moved from the bottles to Caitlin's face. "Your schedule," she said, not necessarily the right one. It was not an argument. Margaret did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The implication carried more weight when left understated. Lydia Brooks entered a moment later, her phone already in her hand. Her attention divided between the screen and the room. "Still doing everything yourself," she said, glancing briefly at the babies before returning her focus to whatever message had just appeared. "You know there are services for this. People who actually know what they're doing." Caitlin placed the final bottle on the counter. "They're doing well," she said. "That's not what I asked, Lydia," replied, her tone light enough to pass as casual. "Sustainability matters. Burnout isn't exactly helpful to anyone." The word again, Caitlin did not respond. She had learned that certain phrases were less about meaning and more about positioning. Lydia used them as markers, small reminders of where she believed authority should rest. Owen was not present for the exchange. He had left early that morning, his departure quiet but not unnoticed. The pattern had become consistent. Early exits, late returns, explanations that were technically sufficient but lacking in detail. Work, he said. Deadlines, meetings. A project that required more attention than anticipated. Each reason was plausible on its own. Together they formed something less precise. Caitlin tracked the pattern without comment. Her notebook had grown thicker. Pages filled with entries that followed the same structure. Date, time, observation. No interpretation. No emotion. Just record. She wrote after each interaction that carried weight. not because she intended to use the information immediately, but because accuracy depended on proximity. Details lost clarity when revisited too late. Late that afternoon, as the light shifted through the living room windows, Caitlin sat with all 3 babies arranged carefully around her. One slept against her chest. Another rested in the curve of her arm. The third lay in a small bassinet within reach, stirring occasionally but not fully waking. Her phone buzzed once. The same sender. Halverson Capital Partners. A follow-up. Caitlin glanced at the notification. The subject line had changed slightly. More direct now. A request for acknowledgement. She turned the phone face down again. Across the room, Lydia watched her. "You're not going to check that?" she asked, nodding toward the device. "It can wait," Caitlin said. Lydia tilted her head, studying her for a moment. "That's an interesting approach," she said. "Most people jump the second their phone lights up, especially if they don't have much else going on." The words settled into the space between them. Caitlin adjusted the blanket covering the infant in the bassinet. "Most people," she said quietly, "don't have 3 infants at once." Lydia smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Fair point," she said. "Still, it's good to stay connected. You never know when something important might come through." Caitlin met her gaze briefly. "I'm aware." The conversation ended there, not because it had reached resolution, but because Lydia lost interest. Her attention returned to her own phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen as she typed a response to someone else. The house fell back into its usual quiet. That evening, Owen returned later than he had the night before. Caitlin heard the door before she saw him. The slight hesitation before the lock turned, the measured pace of his steps as he moved through the entryway. He paused briefly in the kitchen, then continued toward the living room. "You're still up," he said, his tone neutral. Caitlin looked up from where she sat, one of the babies in her arms. "They were awake," she replied. Owen nodded, though the information did not seem to register beyond acknowledgement. His gaze moved briefly across the room, taking in the arrangement of bottles, blankets, and small movements that defined the space. "How are they?" he asked. "They're stable," Caitlin said. He accepted the answer without further question. "I've got an early meeting tomorrow," he said, already shifting his attention away. "Big one. Could define the next quarter." Caitlin did not ask for details. "You should rest," Owen added, though the suggestion carried no adjustment to his own schedule. "You look tired." "I will," she said. He lingered for a moment, as if considering whether to say something more. Then his phone buzzed. The shift in his posture was immediate. He stepped slightly away, angling the screen so it faced only him. The light from the device reflected briefly across his expression. Something softened there. Not relief, not exactly, but something that did not appear when he spoke about work. Caitlin noticed. She did not move. Owen typed a quick response, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I'm going to shower," he said. Caitlin nodded. He left the room without looking back. Later that night, when the house had settled and the last of the babies had fallen asleep, Caitlin returned to the desk in the corner of the bedroom. She opened her notebook. Date, time. She recorded Owen's arrival, his statements, the delay between his responses, the moment his phone lit up, the change in his posture, the angle at which he held the screen. Details that could be dismissed individually, patterns when placed together. Her pen moved steadily across the page. When she finished, she set the notebook aside and reached for her phone. The unread emails remained. 2 now, both from Halverson Capital Partners. Caitlin opened the messaging app instead. A different thread, a contact saved under a single initial, E. The conversation history was sparse but precise. Short exchanges, confirmations, no unnecessary language. She typed a message. Received notifications. Will review soon. Confirm no change in terms. The response came quickly. No change. Awaiting your acknowledgement. Timing is yours. Caitlin read the message twice. Then she locked the phone and placed it on the desk. She did not open the emails. Across the room, the babies slept. Their breathing soft, synchronized in a way that made the silence feel intentional rather than empty. Caitlin remained seated, her posture unchanged. In another part of the house, Owen's voice carried faintly again. Lower this time, more controlled. The conversation was brief, but the tone remained the same as before. Familiar, unguarded, Caitlin did not need to hear the words. She had already recorded enough. Outside, the night deepened. The neighborhood remained still, each house holding its own version of quiet. From the outside, nothing had shifted. The lights remained on schedule. The doors remained closed. Inside, the structure continued to tighten. Not abruptly, not visibly, but in ways that would not be undone once fully set. Caitlin closed her eyes for a moment, not in exhaustion, but in calculation. The timing was not yet complete. The pieces were still aligning, moving toward a point that required precision more than speed. She opened her eyes again and reached for the notebook one last time. A final entry. Email unopened. Awaiting appropriate moment. Then she closed it. The message from Halverson remained unread. For now, that was exactly where it needed to be. By early spring, the distance between what was said and what was true had widened into something no one in the Brooks household seemed interested in measuring. Caitlin Griffin noticed it in the way conversations curved around her instead of including her. In the pauses that appeared when she entered a room. In the subtle recalibration of tone that followed, as if her presence required adjustment rather than acknowledgement. She moved through those spaces without resistance. Silence, when sustained long enough, often encouraged people to reveal more than they intended. Owen's schedule became less predictable. He still used the language of work. Meeting site visits, investor briefings. The terminology remained consistent, but the structure beneath it had begun to shift. He dressed with more care on certain evenings, selecting suits that did not align with his usual pattern. His phone remained closer to him at all times. Notifications were answered immediately, often with a level of attention that did not extend to anything else. Caitlin recorded the changes, not because she needed confirmation, but because precision required it. One evening, Margaret Brooks arranged a small gathering at the house. It was not presented as an event. There were no formal invitations. Just a few guests, she said, people connected to Owen's work. An opportunity to maintain relationships. Caitlin prepared the space without comment. The dining table was set with deliberate symmetry, glassware aligned, plates placed at exact intervals. The kind of arrangement that suggested effort without drawing attention to it. She moved through the process with the same quiet efficiency that had defined her days since the triplets were born. Margaret observed from the doorway. "You've always been good with presentation," she said. "It's useful." Caitlin adjusted the position of a napkin. "It keeps things organized." Margaret stepped further into the room, her gaze moving across the table. "Organization isn't the same as contribution," she replied. "But it helps maintain appearances." The distinction was intentional. Caitlin nodded once, acknowledging the statement without accepting its premise. She had learned that disagreement, when expressed directly, often redirected conversations away from where they were most revealing. Guests arrived shortly after, 2 men from Owen's firm. A consultant Caitlin recognized from a previous project, though he did not acknowledge her beyond a brief glance. And then last, Vanessa Cole. She entered with a familiarity that did not belong to someone visiting for the first time. Her posture was relaxed. Her smile practiced, but effective. She greeted Margaret with ease, Lydia with a brief embrace, and Owen with a look that lasted half a second longer than necessary. Caitlin watched, Vanessa's presence shifted the room immediately. Conversations aligned around her. Laughter came more easily. Owen's tone adjusted, becoming lighter, more engaged. The change was subtle but consistent. Vanessa works in public relations, Owen said at one point, directing the statement toward the group but glancing briefly at Caitlin. She's been helping streamline some of our messaging on the new project. Vanessa smiled. Only where it's needed, she said. There's a lot of potential there. Caitlin placed a serving dish on the table. Clarity helps, she said. Vanessa turned toward her, assessing. It does, she agreed, though not everyone knows how to create it. The comment was neutral on the surface. The implication was not. Caitlin met her gaze for a moment. Some prefer to observe first, she said. It reduces unnecessary revisions. Vanessa held her attention a fraction longer, then smiled again. That's one way to approach it. The conversation shifted before it could settle further. Dinner progressed with the kind of controlled ease that often concealed imbalance. Owen spoke at length about the upcoming project, outlining projections, timelines, and expected returns. He referenced Halverson Capital Partners more than once, positioning the connection as a potential advantage, though he framed it as still uncertain. They're cautious, he said. They don't commit easily. But if we secure their backing, it changes everything. Margaret nodded approvingly. That's the kind of partnership we've been aiming for. Lydia leaned back in her chair. Assuming they see the value, she added. They will, Owen said, his confidence immediate. We've put together a strong case. Caitlin listened without interruption. She noted the details. The way Owen described the structure of the bid. The emphasis he placed on certain elements. The absence of others. He spoke as if the outcome depended entirely on his presentation, as if the evaluation process remained external to him. He did not know how close it already was. Vanessa contributed occasionally, her comments reinforcing Owen's position while subtly reframing it. She spoke about narrative perception, the importance of aligning technical strength with public confidence. Her language was polished, her delivery precise. Margaret watched her with interest. You understand positioning, she said. That's valuable. Vanessa inclined her head slightly. It's about understanding what people need to hear, she replied. Caitlin considered the phrasing, need not truth. After dinner, the group moved into the living room. Conversations split into smaller clusters. Owen stood near the window with one of his colleagues discussing numbers in lower tones. Margaret and Lydia remained near the seating area, their attention shifting between guests. Vanessa moved freely between them. At one point, she stepped closer to Owen, her hand brushing lightly against his arm as she spoke. The gesture was brief, easily overlooked by anyone not paying attention. Caitlin was paying attention. She did not react. Instead, she stepped away from the group and moved toward the kitchen. The transition was smooth, unnoticed. She cleared dishes, rinsed glassware, and placed items in the dishwasher with methodical care. Her phone rested on the counter. It lit up once. Another email. Halverson Capital Partners. Caitlin dried her hands and picked up the device. The subject line was direct now. Final notice. Confirmation required. She opened the message. The text was concise. Approval granted. Terms as agreed. Awaiting formal acknowledgement to proceed with execution. Attached documents followed. Contracts, financial breakdowns, implementation timelines. Each file labeled with precision. Caitlin read through the summary once. Then again, nothing had changed. The numbers aligned with her projections. The structure remained intact. The timeline, while aggressive, was manageable. She closed the email without responding. In the living room, laughter rose briefly, then settled. Caitlin returned to the counter and placed the phone face down. The timing was not yet complete. When she re-entered the room, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Conversations were winding down, guests preparing to leave. Owen stood near the door, thanking them for coming, his tone confident, his posture relaxed. Vanessa lingered. "I'll follow up tomorrow," she said to Owen, her voice low enough that it did not carry far. "We should align before the next meeting." Owen nodded. "I'll be available." Their exchange was brief, but the familiarity remained. Caitlin watched from a distance. Margaret approached her as the last guest stepped outside. "You handled the evening well," she said. "It's important to support Owen when things are at this level." Caitlin met her gaze. "I understand." Margaret studied her for a moment, as if expecting something more. When it did not come, she turned away. The house quieted again. Lydia retreated to her room, her phone already in hand. Margaret moved through the space, adjusting small details, restoring order. Owen remained near the door for a moment longer, then closed it. He turned toward Caitlin. "We're close," he said. "Closer than we've ever been. This deal could define everything." Caitlin nodded once. "I'm glad," she said. He seemed satisfied with the response. Neither of them mentioned Vanessa. Neither of them mentioned the emails. Later that night, when the house had settled into silence once more, Caitlin returned to the desk. She opened her notebook. Date, time. She recorded the evening. Vanessa's arrival, the interactions, the physical proximity, the statements made about Halverson Capital, the assumptions embedded within them. Then she opened her phone again. The email remained where she had left it, awaiting acknowledgement. Caitlin rested her hand lightly on the device. The contract was ready, the outcome already determined pending a single response. Across the house, Owen slept. Margaret's room was dark. Lydia's door closed. Everything appeared stable. Caitlin looked at the screen one last time, then locked the phone and set it aside. The moment had not yet arrived, but it was approaching, and when it did, it would not require explanation. The evening Margaret chose for the family dinner was not marked on any calendar, but it carried the weight of something prearranged. Caitlin Griffin sensed it in the way the house was prepared. Not the visible details. Those were familiar. The polished surfaces, the carefully arranged table, the controlled lighting that softened every edge without hiding anything. It was something beneath that. A quiet alignment, a shared understanding that had formed without her. She did not ask about it. She moved through the kitchen with the same measured precision she had always used, preparing dishes that required attention, but not improvisation. The triplets had been settled earlier than usual, their routine adjusted without disruption. 3 cribs aligned in the nursery, 3 steady rhythms of breath filling the space with a fragile kind of calm. Margaret entered, just as Caitlin finished placing the last dish on the counter. "Everything ready?" she asked. "Yes," Caitlin said. Margaret glanced at the spread, her expression neutral. "Good," she said. "It's important that tonight stays structured." The pause before the last word was brief but intentional. Caitlin met her gaze. "It will." Margaret held her attention for a moment longer, then turned and left the room. The guests were already present. Lydia sat at the dining table, her posture relaxed, her phone resting face down beside her plate. Vanessa Cole occupied the seat to Owen's right, her presence no longer tentative. She spoke quietly with him, her tone low, her body angled just enough to suggest familiarity without inviting comment. Owen looked up when Caitlin entered. "There you are," he said. "We were waiting." Caitlin took her seat without responding to the implication. Dinner began without ceremony. For the first few minutes, the conversation followed its usual pattern. Light topics, updates framed as casual remarks. Margaret guided the flow with subtle precision, redirecting whenever the tone drifted too far from where she wanted it. Then gradually the structure shifted. "We should address something," Margaret said, placing her utensils down with deliberate care. The room adjusted. Owen leaned back slightly, his expression composed but attentive. Lydia's focus sharpened. Vanessa remained still, her gaze moving briefly between them before settling on Caitlin. Caitlin set her glass down. Margaret continued. "This arrangement," she said, gesturing lightly toward the space, though it was unclear whether she meant the house or the situation as a whole, "is no longer sustainable." The word again. Caitlin did not speak. Owen exhaled quietly, as if releasing something he had been holding. "It's not about one thing," he said. "It's the overall picture." Caitlin looked at him. "What picture?" she asked. The question was simple. Not defensive, not confrontational, just precise. Owen hesitated for half a second. "The imbalance," he said. "Financial primarily. But not just that." Lydia leaned forward slightly. "You don't contribute," she said, her tone sharper now that the direction had been established. "Not in a way that supports this household." Caitlin held her gaze. "The children are part of this household." "That's expected," Lydia replied. "Not exceptional." Vanessa remained silent, but her attention did not waver. Margaret folded her hands on the table. "No one is questioning your effort," she said. "But effort without impact is limited." The phrasing was careful. Caitlin considered it. "What impact would you define as sufficient?" she asked. Margaret did not answer immediately. She allowed the question to settle, to shift the focus briefly before reclaiming it. "Independence," she said. "Contribution. Stability that does not rely entirely on Owen." Owen straightened slightly. "I've been covering everything," he said. "The mortgage, the expenses, the upcoming costs. With the project at this stage, I need to be able to focus." Caitlin listened. "And I'm preventing that," she asked. "It's not about blame," Owen said quickly. "It's about reality." Lydia let out a small breath that almost resembled a laugh. "It is about reality," she said. "And the reality is, this isn't working." The sentence landed with more weight than the ones before it. Vanessa shifted in her seat, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the table. She did not speak, but her presence reinforced the direction of the conversation. Caitlin looked at each of them in turn. Margaret, composed, certain. Lydia, direct, unfiltered. Owen, controlled but avoiding something beneath the surface. Vanessa, observing, waiting. The alignment was complete. "What are you asking?" Caitlin said. Margaret answered. "We believe it would be better," she said, "if you made other arrangements." The phrasing softened the intent. It did not change it. Caitlin did not look away. "With 3 infants," she said. Margaret's expression did not shift. "There are options," she replied. "Temporary solutions, support services." Lydia nodded. "It doesn't have to be permanent," she added. "But this situation isn't viable." Owen did not speak. Caitlin turned to him. "Is this what you want?" she asked. The question held there, suspended in the space between them. Owen met her eyes, then looked away. "I think it's necessary," he said. The distinction mattered to him. Caitlin noted it. Silence followed, not the kind that invited reconsideration. The kind that confirmed a decision had already been made. Caitlin reached for her glass and took a small sip of water. Her hand remained steady. Her phone resting beside her plate lit up briefly. A new notification. Halverson Capital Partners. The light reflected faintly against the surface of the table. No one commented on it. Caitlin glanced at the screen just long enough to register the sender. The subject line had changed again. Final confirmation window. She turned the phone face down. Margaret watched the movement. "You'll need to act quickly," she said. "Delays will only complicate things." Caitlin set her glass down. When she asked, the room held still. Owen answered this time. "Tonight," he said. There was no hesitation. The words settled into the space final in a way that did not require repetition. Caitlin absorbed it without visible reaction. "Understood," she said. Lydia shifted back in her chair, her posture easing slightly now that the outcome had been spoken aloud. "It's for the best," she said. "Long term." Vanessa remained silent, but her gaze lingered on Caitlin a moment longer than before, as if trying to read something that was not being offered. Caitlin did not provide it. Dinner ended shortly after. No one suggested extending it. No one attempted to return to lighter topics. The structure that had been established at the beginning of the evening had fulfilled its purpose. Caitlin stood and began clearing the table. Owen remained seated for a moment, then rose as well, though he did not move to assist her. "I'll give you some time," he said. Caitlin nodded. "That won't be necessary," she replied. The statement was not defiant. It was factual. Margaret observed the exchange without comment. Lydia picked up her phone. Vanessa stood smoothing the fabric of her dress. "I should go," she said softly. Owen walked her to the door. Caitlin continued clearing the table. Plates stacked, glasses gathered, utensils aligned, each movement precise. In the quiet that followed, the house felt larger than it had before. Not emptier, just more defined. Her phone remained on the table, its screen dark again. The message waiting, the decision already made. Caitlin Griffin did not rush. That was the first thing anyone watching from a distance might have noticed if they had been looking closely enough to understand what restraint actually meant. Inside the house, after the dinner ended and the structure of the evening dissolved into quiet separation movement, resumed in small, controlled increments, Lydia retreated upstairs already absorbed in her phone. Margaret remained in the living room adjusting objects that did not need adjusting, restoring a sense of order that had never truly been disrupted. Owen lingered near the entryway, his posture rigid as though proximity to the door might shorten the process. Caitlin continued clearing the table. She rinsed each plate before placing it in the dishwasher. She dried her hands between tasks. She did not skip steps, did not accelerate the rhythm of her movements to match the expectation that she would leave quickly. Time in that moment belonged to her. When the last glass was placed on the rack, she wiped down the counter, folded the cloth neatly, and set it aside. Only then did she pick up her phone. The screen lit up immediately. Halverson Capital Partners. Final confirmation required. Execution pending. Caitlin read the subject line without opening the message. Then she locked the phone and slipped it into her pocket. Upstairs, the triplets had begun to stir. She moved toward the nursery without looking back. The room was dim, lit only by a soft lamp near the corner. 3 small forms shifted in their cribs, their cries not yet fully formed but building. Caitlin stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind her, creating a space separate from the rest of the house. For a few minutes, everything narrowed. She lifted one child, then another, then the third, adjusting her movements to keep each of them calm. Her voice remained low, steady, more vibration than sound. She changed them, fed them, wrapped them carefully in blankets that held their warmth close. The routine grounded her, each motion familiar, each response measured, no room for distraction. When they settled again, she did not place them back immediately. Instead, she stood there for a moment, holding all 3 in sequence, committing the weight of them to memory in that space. Then she began to pack. Not everything. Only what was necessary. A single bag for the children. Essentials. Diapers, bottles, formula, a few changes of clothes. Another smaller bag for herself. Documents remained in a separate folder, already organized, already prepared, long before this night. She moved efficiently without hesitation. Downstairs, Owen's voice carried faintly. "Is she almost done?" Lydia asked. Margaret responded, her tone controlled. "She'll leave when she's ready." Owen did not reply. Caitlin heard the exchange through the floor, not the exact words, but the shape of them. The impatience. The expectation. She zipped the final bag and lifted it over her shoulder. Then, she picked up the first of the triplets, securing the infant against her chest. The second followed, supported along her arm. The third she placed carefully into a portable carrier, adjusting the straps until the position was stable. Only then did she open the nursery door. The hallway light was brighter than the room she had just left. Caitlin blinked once, allowing her eyes to adjust, then walked toward the stairs. Each step was deliberate. No missteps, no hesitation. When she reached the bottom, all three of them were waiting. Margaret stood near the center of the room, her posture unchanged. Lydia leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her attention fixed on Caitlin now that the moment had fully arrived. Owen stood closest to the door. None of them moved to help. Caitlin approached without slowing. "I've gathered what we need," she said. Owen nodded once as though acknowledging a completed task. "There's a motel 2 blocks down," Lydia said. "It's temporary, but it should be sufficient." Caitlin did not respond. Margaret stepped slightly forward. "You'll need to make arrangements quickly," she said. "Stability is important for the children." Caitlin met her gaze. "It is," she said. The agreement did not bridge anything. Owen opened the door. Cold air moved in, immediately shifting the temperature of the room. Outside, the street was quiet, the kind of quiet that suggested observation without involvement. A porch light from a neighboring house remained on. Curtains shifted slightly behind a window across the street. Witnesses, uninvolved. Caitlin stepped toward the doorway. Owen did not look at the children. "This is the best option," he said, his voice lower now, "given the situation." Caitlin paused just long enough to register the statement. Then she continued forward. The threshold was crossed without ceremony. Outside, the air was sharper than it had seemed from inside. Caitlin adjusted her hold on the infants, securing the blankets more tightly around them. The carrier rested against her side, stable but heavy. Behind her, the door remained open for a moment. Then it closed. The sound was controlled, not loud, not abrupt, but final. Caitlin did not turn around. She stepped down from the porch and onto the walkway, her pace steady, her posture unchanged. The distance between her and the house increased with each step, though nothing about her movement suggested urgency. At the edge of the driveway, she stopped. Not because she needed to, because the moment required acknowledgement. She shifted the carrier slightly, ensuring all 3 children were secure. Then, with one hand, she reached into her pocket and took out her phone. The screen lit up instantly. Halverson Capital Partners. Final confirmation window closing. Caitlin opened the email. The text was unchanged. Approval granted. Terms as agreed. Awaiting formal acknowledgement. Below, the documents remained attached, their presence steady, unaffected by the events that had just taken place. Caitlin read the first line once. Then she scrolled, each clause aligned with what she had built over months of quiet work. Each figure matched the projections she had calculated late at night in fragments of time. No one in that house had noticed. The number remained at the center of it all. $500 million. Not potential, not negotiation. Finalized. Awaiting her. Caitlin closed her eyes briefly, not in hesitation, but in completion. When she opened them again, she selected the reply field. Her response was short. Confirmed. Proceed as scheduled. She pressed send. The message left her phone and entered a system far larger than the street she stood on, far larger than the house behind her. The shift was immediate, though not visible. Inside the house, nothing changed. Margaret moved through the living room, restoring order. Lydia returned to her phone. Owen stood for a moment longer near the door, then turned away, convinced the evening had resolved what needed to be resolved. Outside, Caitlin placed the phone back into her pocket. She adjusted her hold on the children once more. Then she began to walk. Not toward the motel Lydia had mentioned, toward something else entirely. Caitlin Griffin did not follow Lydia's directions. She walked past the motel without slowing, the neon vacancy sign flickering against the glass as if trying to claim her attention. It did not. The place offered exactly what it promised. Temporary shelter, nothing more. A pause, not a step. Caitlin had no intention of pausing. 2 blocks further, the street widened into a commercial strip that stayed lit well past midnight. A rideshare vehicle idled near the curb, its driver watching the empty sidewalk with the quiet patience of someone used to waiting for decisions to be made. Caitlin approached. "Are you available?" she asked. The driver nodded immediately, stepping out to open the rear door. His eyes moved briefly over the 3 infants, the bags, the controlled way she held everything together. He did not ask questions. "Where to?" he said. Caitlin gave an address. Not a motel. A short-term corporate residence downtown, booked earlier that week under a different name. The driver glanced at the address, then back at her. "That's about 20 minutes, he said. "That's fine," Caitlin replied. He opened the door wider. Caitlin settled the carrier first, securing it carefully before adjusting the other 2 children in her arms. The bags followed. Only when everything was stable did she sit down, her movements deliberate, her posture unchanged. The door closed. The car pulled away from the curb. Through the window, the neighborhood receded. The Brooks house remained where it had always been, its lights steady, its structure intact. From the outside, nothing suggested that anything had shifted inside it. Caitlin did not look back. Inside the vehicle, the sound was contained. The soft hum of the engine, the faint movement of the children. One stirred, then settled again as Caitlin adjusted the blanket without speaking. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "You're traveling alone?" He asked the question, careful, not intrusive. "Yes," Caitlin said. He nodded once and did not continue. The city drew closer. Streetlights multiplied. Buildings rose higher. The quiet of the suburban block gave way to a different kind of stillness, one shaped by distance rather than familiarity. The corporate residence stood on a corner that did not draw attention, its exterior clean, its entrance controlled. The driver pulled up to the front. "I can help with the bags," he offered. Caitlin shook her head. "I have it." She paid through the app before stepping out. The night air felt different here. Less sharp, more contained between buildings that blocked the wind. Caitlin adjusted her hold on the children and approached the entrance. The door required a code. She entered it without hesitation. Inside, the lobby was quiet. No staff at the desk, only a camera positioned above it, recording without commentary. The lighting was soft, but sufficient. A small seating area sat unused to one side. Caitlin moved directly to the elevator. The ride up was brief. On the 12th floor, she stepped out into a corridor lined with identical doors. Her steps remained steady, measured by the weight she carried rather than the distance she covered. At the end of the hall, she stopped. Room 1208. She unlocked the door and entered. The space was functional. A small living area, a kitchenette, a bedroom beyond it. Clean, ordered, unused. Caitlin closed the door behind her and set the bags down first. Then she moved to the bedroom. 3 temporary cribs had been arranged in advance, positioned with enough space between them to allow movement without obstruction. She placed each child down, carefully adjusting blankets, ensuring each one settled into sleep without disruption. Only when they were all still did she step back. The room held its own quiet now. Not the quiet of suppression, the quiet of control. Caitlin returned to the living area and took out her phone. A new message had arrived. Ethan Caldwell. She opened it. Confirmation received. Funds will begin processing within 24 hours. We should formalize protective filings immediately. Call when ready. Caitlin read the message once. Then she tapped the call button. Ethan answered on the second ring. "I expected you might call tonight," he said. "I've secured temporary housing," Caitlin replied. "We can proceed." "Good," Ethan said. Papers shifted faintly on his end of the line. "I'll need your authorization to initiate the filings. Given the circumstances, we'll move quickly." Caitlin moved to the small table near the window and sat down. "Outline the steps," she said. Ethan did. Protective filings to establish independent financial control. Immediate separation of any potential shared liabilities. Documentation of the eviction supported by available evidence. Preparation for custody proceedings framed around stability and demonstrated neglect. Each step was precise. Each step legal. Caitlin listened without interrupting. "Do you have documentation of the incident?" Ethan asked. "Yes," she said. "Partial recordings. Neighbor camera coverage likely available." "I'll retrieve it." "Good," he said. "The more complete the record, the stronger the position. Timing matters here, I understand." There was a brief pause. "You've already confirmed the contract," Ethan said. "Yes." "Then everything changes from this point forward," he replied. Caitlin looked toward the bedroom. Nothing had changed there. "I'm aware," she said. They finalized the immediate actions. Digital signatures, authorizations. Deadlines measured in hours rather than days. When the call ended, Caitlin placed the phone on the table and opened her bag. Inside the folder remained exactly where she had placed it. Documents, copies of identification, financial records, correspondence. Notes structured in a way that required no explanation. She arranged them on the table. Not because she needed to review them again, because structure required visibility. Outside the window, the city continued without interruption. Traffic moved below, distant and irrelevant. Lights remained on in buildings across the street, each window holding its own narrative, separate from hers. Caitlin did not focus on them. She opened her notebook. Date, time. She recorded the evening, the dinner, the statements, the directive to leave, the execution of that directive, the presence of witnesses, the absence of assistance. Then she added the final entry. Contract confirmed. Legal process initiated. She closed the notebook. In the bedroom, one of the children stirred. Caitlin stood immediately and moved back into the room. Her steps quiet, her presence steady. She adjusted the blanket, placed her hand lightly against the child's back until the movement settled. 3 steady breaths. Then stillness again. Caitlin remained there for a moment longer. Then she turned off the light. Back in the living area, the phone lit up once more. A new message. Unknown number. Caitlin looked at it without opening. Then she set the phone face down. Whoever it was, it could wait. The structure was already in motion. And this time, she controlled it. Morning arrived, without ceremony. In the corporate residence, light filtered through the narrow gap between the curtains pale, and even touching the surfaces of the room without fully warming them. Caitlin Griffin was already awake before it reached the far wall. She did not rely on alarms. The triplets stirred in sequence, not together, but close enough that the pattern remained predictable. Caitlin moved between them with quiet efficiency, her movements unchanged from the night before. Feedings measured, diapers replaced, blankets adjusted. Each action precise, controlled, free of hesitation. Nothing about her pace suggested urgency. Everything about it suggested continuity. On the small table in the living area, her phone lit up again. Multiple notifications, emails, messages, missed calls from an unknown number that had begun sometime after midnight and continued into the early hours. The pattern was uneven at first, then more frequent, then abruptly stopped. Caitlin glanced at the screen. She did not open them. Instead, she completed the morning routine first. 3 infants secured, bottles cleaned, the space returned to order. Only when the immediate structure of the room was restored did she return to the table and pick up the phone. She opened the first email. Halverson Capital Partners. Execution confirmed. Initial transfer initiated. Full disbursement scheduled in phases over the next 48 hours. Congratulations. Caitlin read the message once. Then she opened the second. A formal document outlining the activation of the contract. Signatures in place. Digital verification complete. Legal language structured to remove ambiguity. The number appeared again. $500 million, now in motion. She set the phone down. In another part of the city, the Brooks household had also begun to shift. Owen Brooks woke later than usual. The previous night had resolved something, or so he believed. The tension that had built over weeks, months, had reached a conclusion. The house felt quieter now, more contained. The absence of disruption mistaken for stability. He moved through his routine without deviation. Coffee, phone, calendar. The first indication that something had changed did not come from within the house. It came from his inbox. A message marked urgent. From a contact at Brooks Infrastructure Group. Subject, immediate review. Required, Halverson status. Owen opened it. The text was brief. Need to discuss. Halverson has paused all communication. Pending internal review. Do not proceed with external commitments until clarified. Owen read the message twice. Paused communication. The phrasing did not align with his expectations. He checked his phone. No missed calls from Halverson. No follow-up emails. No confirmation of the next meeting that had been tentatively scheduled the previous week. He stood still for a moment. Then he dialed. The call connected to an assistant. Halverson Capital Partners. She said, her tone neutral. This is Owen Brooks, he replied. I need to speak with someone regarding our pending proposal. There was a pause. 1 moment, she said. The line shifted. Then another voice. Measured, controlled. This is Daniel Wright, the man said. How can I assist? Owen straightened slightly. Yes, Daniel. We've been in ongoing discussions regarding the infrastructure project. I was expecting confirmation on next steps. Another pause. I'm aware of the file, Daniel said. At this time, the proposal is under review. Under review, Owen repeated. We've already submitted all required documentation. Yes, Daniel said. And it is being reviewed. The tone did not invite further interpretation. Is there an issue, Owen asked. Not one I'm authorized to discuss, Daniel replied. You'll be notified of any updates. The call ended shortly after. Owen lowered the phone slowly. Something had shifted. Not visibly. Not in a way he could immediately identify, but enough to interrupt the certainty he had carried into the morning. In the living room, Margaret Brooks was already seated reviewing a set of documents that had nothing to do with Owen's call. You're up late, she said without looking up. There's a delay, Owen replied. Margaret's eyes lifted. With Halverson, she asked, Yes? She set the papers down. What kind of delay? They've paused communication, Owen said. Internal review. Margaret considered the words. That's not typical, she said. No, Owen agreed. Lydia entered a moment later, her phone already in her hand. What's not typical, she asked. Owen repeated the explanation. Lydia frowned slightly. That doesn't make sense, she said. They were interested. They still are, Owen replied quickly. This is procedural. Margaret did not respond immediately. Procedural delays don't usually cut off communication entirely, she said. The statement lingered. Owen checked his phone again. Still nothing. Back in the corporate residence, Caitlin sat at the table, her posture unchanged. Another message appeared. Ethan Caldwell. Funds partially received. We're proceeding with filings. Court documentation will be submitted today. Caitlin opened the message and typed a response. Understood. Proceed. She sent it without hesitation. Then she opened the next email. A confirmation from her bank. Account updated. The first transfer had arrived. The number was smaller than the full amount, but significant enough to confirm that the process had begun exactly as outlined. Caitlin closed the email. She stood and moved to the window. From the 12th floor, the city appeared distant, its movement reduced to patterns of light and shadow. Nothing about it suggested the scale of the transactions occurring within it. Nothing about it reflected the shift that had already taken place. Behind her, one of the children stirred. Caitlin turned immediately, her attention returning to the room. The routine resumed. In the Brooks house, the tension increased by degrees. Owen made additional calls, voicemails, messages, follow-ups. Each response when it came was the same. Under review. Pending. Await further instruction. Margaret watched without interrupting. Lydia's confidence began to thin, replaced by something less defined. This could impact the timeline, she said. It won't, Owen replied, though the certainty in his voice had begun to fracture. It already has, Margaret said quietly. The room held that statement without resolution. Owen stepped away, moving toward the study, where he could make calls without interruption. The door closed behind him. Margaret and Lydia remained in the living room. For the first time in days, neither of them spoke immediately. Across the city, Caitlin returned to the table. Her phone lit up again. A new message. From Halverson. Phase 2 scheduled. Confirmation of asset alignment required. Uri. Caitlin read the line once. Then she opened the attached document. Inside, the structure of the deal expanded. Entities, allocations, control. Her name appeared where it needed to, not visible to everyone, but central. She closed the file and placed the phone back on the table. The structure was no longer theoretical, it was active. And in another part of the city, without understanding how or why, Owen Brooks was already feeling the first effects of something he could not see. By mid-afternoon, the distance between uncertainty and consequence began to narrow. Caitlin Griffin structured her day around what could be controlled. The triplets slept in staggered intervals, their rhythms now partially aligned with the quiet routine she had established overnight. She used the gaps between their waking cycles with precision. Bottles prepared in advance. Supplies arranged within reach. Nothing left to chance. On the small table, her laptop remained open for the first time since she had arrived. The interface was clean familiar. Griffin Strategic Holdings. The name appeared at the top of the screen, understated but final. The entity had been registered months earlier, its framework built gradually, its purpose not fully activated until now. Caitlin navigated through the dashboard. Accounts linked, assets listed. Incoming transfers marked as pending with timestamps already assigned. The first phase had completed. The second was scheduled. The third conditional required only confirmation of alignment across specific holdings tied to the infrastructure sector. She opened the corresponding file. Inside the structure extended outward, connecting entities that on the surface appeared unrelated. Investment vehicles, partner firms, subcontractors positioned within larger bids. Brooks' infrastructure group appeared within that network, not prominently, but directly connected. Caitlin reviewed the lines of association without expression. Each connection had been placed intentionally not to expose, but to align. Influence did not require visibility. It required access. Her phone buzzed. A call from Ethan Caldwell. She answered immediately. "We're moving faster than expected," he said without preamble. "The filings went through. The court has acknowledged receipt. We'll have a preliminary hearing date within 48 hours. Caitlin closed the file on her screen. "Any response from their side?" she asked. "Not formally," Ethan replied. "But I've seen the early indicators. They've started making inquiries. That usually means they're trying to understand the scope before reacting." Caitlin leaned back slightly in her chair. "They don't have the full picture yet," she said. "No," Ethan agreed. "But they will." There was a brief pause. "You're prepared for that?" he asked. Caitlin looked toward the bedroom. 3 steady forms. 3 controlled breaths. "Yes," she said. "Good," Ethan replied, "because once they connect the financial structure to the legal filings, the pressure will increase. They'll attempt to negotiate reposition, possibly discredit." Caitlin considered the sequence. "They'll start with denial," she said. "Most likely," Ethan replied. "Then urgency." Caitlin nodded, though he could not see it. "We proceed as planned," she said. "Agreed," Ethan said. "I'll send over the next set of documents for review." The call ended. Caitlin returned to the laptop. She initiated the next action: asset alignment confirmation. The system prompted for verification. She entered it without hesitation. A progress indicator appeared. Processing. Across the city, Owen Brooks stood in his office. The door closed, his phone pressed against his ear. "This doesn't align with our timeline," he said, his tone controlled but strained. "We were given clear indications that the proposal was moving forward." The voice on the other end remained neutral. "As stated earlier, the proposal is under review," the representative replied. "No further details are available at this time." Owen exhaled slowly. "We have commitments based on that expectation," he said. "Delays at this stage introduce risk." "Understood," the voice said. "You will be notified of any updates." The line disconnected. Owen lowered the phone, his grip tightening slightly before he released it. The pattern was repeating. No information, no access, only delay. He turned toward his desk and opened his laptop. Internal communications filled the screen. Messages from colleagues, questions from partners, requests for clarification he could not yet provide. He began typing responses, measured, reassuring. Framed to maintain confidence without committing to specifics, the structure held, for now. In the living room, Margaret and Lydia sat in a silence that had begun to feel unfamiliar. Lydia broke it first. "This is more than procedural," she said. "Something's off." Margaret did not look up immediately. "Yes," she said, "it is." Lydia leaned forward. "Do you think it's related to last night?" she asked. Margaret's gaze lifted slowly. "Everything is related to everything else," she said. "The question is how." The answer did not come. Back in the corporate residence, Caitlin watched as the progress indicator completed. Confirmation received. Alignment established. Phase 2 initiated. A new notification followed immediately. Halverson Capital Partners. Asset structure verified. Proceeding with expansion of control parameters. Further instructions to follow. Caitlin read the message once. Then she opened the attached document. Inside, the expansion was outlined in detail. additional leverage points, voting rights embedded within secondary entities, approval thresholds that could influence decisions without direct ownership appearing obvious. Her name appeared again, not as a headline, as a foundation. She closed the document. In the bedroom, one of the triplets began to cry. Caitlin stood immediately and moved toward the sound. The transition was seamless. Work paused. Care resumed. She lifted the child, adjusted the blanket, held him until the cry softened into a steady rhythm of breath. The other two remained asleep, balance maintained. In the Brooks house, the pressure continued to build. Owen returned to the living room, his expression controlled but tighter than before. "They're not giving us anything," he said. Margaret studied him. "Then we need to find another way to access the information," she replied. Lydia crossed her arms. "Through who?" she asked. "They've cut direct communication," Margaret considered. "Not entirely," she said. Owen frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Margaret's gaze shifted toward him. "Everyone answers to someone," she said. "We just need to identify who." The statement hung in the air. Owen looked away, his mind already moving through possibilities. Contacts, intermediaries, points of influence. None of them provided immediate access. Across the city, Caitlin returned to the living area, the child now calm in her arms. She sat down and reached for her phone. Another message. Unknown number. This time, she opened it. "Caitlin, we need to talk. Call me. Owen." The message was brief, direct. Caitlin read it without reaction. Then she locked the phone and placed it back on the table. The timing had shifted. They were beginning to feel it, but they still did not understand it. Caitlin adjusted the child in her arms and looked toward the window. The city moved, as it always did, unaffected on the surface. Beneath it, structures shifted, not loudly, not visibly, but in ways that would not return to their previous form. By late afternoon, uncertainty in the Brooks household had evolved into something less manageable. It no longer felt like a delay. It felt like resistance. Owen Brooks stood in the study with the door closed. His phone resting on the desk in front of him, the screen filled with unanswered messages. He had shifted from calls to emails, from emails to internal memos, attempting to reassert control over a situation that refused to clarify itself. The language he used remained consistent. Temporary pause. Under review. Standard process. Each phrase was designed to stabilize perception, to prevent concern from spreading through the network of colleagues and partners who depended on his certainty. But repetition began to expose its own weakness. The more he used those phrases, the less they held. On the other side of the door, Margaret Brooks was no longer pretending that nothing had changed. She moved through the living room with measured pacing, stopping occasionally to glance toward the hallway, as if proximity might provide information. Lydia remained seated, her phone in her hand, her earlier confidence replaced by a more focused attention. "This doesn't make sense," Lydia said again, though this time the statement carried less dismissal and more calculation. "They don't just stop responding, not at this stage." Margaret did not answer immediately. "They do," she said eventually, when something shifts in their evaluation. Lydia frowned. "What could shift?" she asked. "We didn't change anything." Margaret's gaze moved briefly toward the closed study door. "Not everything happens inside this house," she said. The implication lingered. Inside the study, Owen opened another message. This one from a senior associate. "Clients are asking for confirmation on Halverson alignment. We need a clear answer by end of day." Owen stared at the screen. Clear answer. There wasn't one. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment, not in exhaustion, but in recalibration. He ran through the timeline again. The meetings, the exchanges, the signals he had interpreted as progress. Nothing in that sequence suggested this outcome, unless something had been introduced without his knowledge. He opened his eyes and reached for his phone again. This time he scrolled to Caitlin's contact. The message he had sent earlier remained unread. No response. He typed another. "Caitlin, this is urgent. Call me." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then sent it. Across the city, Caitlin Griffin was seated at the small table. The laptop opened the structure of her work fully visible now that the process had moved beyond concealment. The triplets were asleep again, their breathing steady, their presence contained within the bedroom. Her phone lit up. Another message from Owen. She looked at it without opening the thread. Then she set the phone aside. Timing mattered. She returned her attention to the screen. Griffin Strategic Holdings. The dashboard had updated. Phase 2 completed. Phase 3 pending. The final stage required a set of approvals tied to specific entities connected to the infrastructure sector. The structure was layered deliberately, ensuring that influence could be exercised without direct exposure. Caitlin opened the corresponding file. A list of companies appeared. Subcontractors, material suppliers, consulting firms. Each one connected directly or indirectly to projects under Brooks Infrastructure Group. She selected the first. Ownership breakdown. Voting rights distribution. A small percentage acquired through a secondary investment channel positioned her within the decision-making framework. Not enough to control outright. Enough to influence. She moved to the next, and the next. The pattern repeated. Individually, each position appeared minor. Collectively, they formed something else. A network. Caitlin reviewed the alignment once more, confirming that each piece sat exactly where it needed to. Then she initiated the final confirmation. A prompt appeared. Proceed with activation of control parameters. She paused, not because she doubted the decision, because she understood its weight. Once executed, the structure would no longer be theoretical. It would begin to affect outcomes in ways that could not be reversed quickly. She selected Yes, Processing. The system responded immediately. Control parameters activated. A new message followed. Halverson Capital Partners. Integration complete. Monitoring impact. Caitlin closed the file. The structure was now active. Across the city, the impact began to surface. In Owen's inbox, a new message appeared. From a subcontractor. Need clarification on revised approval chain. We've received updated directives that conflict with prior agreements. Owen frowned. Revised approval chain. He opened the message. Attached was a document. He scanned it quickly. The language had changed. Approval thresholds adjusted. Decision points reassigned. The document referenced an oversight entity he did not recognize. He scrolled further. The name appeared. Griffin Strategic Holdings. Owen sat up straighter. He read the line again. Griffin Strategic Holdings. The name meant nothing to him. But it was there, embedded within the structure. He opened another message. Similar content. Different subcontractor. Same issue. Revised approvals. Conflicting directives. The pattern formed quickly. Something had inserted itself into the process. Something with authority. He stood abruptly, the chair moving back against the floor with more force than intended. Margaret looked up as he entered the living room. "What is it?" she asked. Owen held up the phone. "Someone's interfering," he said. "There's a new entity in the approval chain." Margaret's expression sharpened. "Who?" she asked. Owen shook his head. "I don't know," he said. "Griffin Strategic Holdings." The name settled into the room. Lydia's eyes narrowed. "I've never heard of them," she said. Margaret did not respond immediately. She repeated the name quietly, as if testing its weight. Griffin. The word lingered. Owen continued. They're positioned across multiple subcontractors, he said. Small percentages, but enough to shift approvals. It's affecting the flow of decisions. Margaret stood. That's not random, she said. No, Owen agreed. It's coordinated. Lydia leaned forward. Can we remove them? She asked. Owen's jaw tightened. Not quickly, he said. They're embedded. The room fell silent. Across the city, Caitlin stood by the window, her phone in her hand. A new message appeared. Ethan Caldwell. Seeing movement on their side. They've identified the entity, not the connection yet. Caitlin read the message. Then she looked out at the city again. Lights shifting, traffic moving. Nothing visible had changed. Inside the structures, everything had. Her phone buzzed again. Owen calling. This time, she answered. Caitlin, he said immediately. We need to talk. His voice was controlled, but the strain beneath it was clear. Caitlin did not sit down. I'm listening, she said. There was a brief pause. Do you know anything about a company called Griffin Strategic Holdings? He asked. Caitlin looked at the reflection of her own face in the window. Calm, unchanged. Yes, she said. Silence filled the line. On the other end, Owen did not speak immediately. The question he had not yet formed began to take shape, and for the first time since the door had closed the night before, he was no longer certain of where he stood. The silence that followed Caitlin's answer did not break immediately. On Owen Brooks's end of the line, the absence of sound carried more weight than anything he could have said in that moment. He remained still, phone pressed against his ear, the name he had just spoken, Griffin Strategic Holdings, no longer abstract. Yes, Caitlin had said. Not uncertain, not questioning, certain. Owen inhaled slowly. What do you mean, yes? He asked, though the question lacked direction. Caitlin did not rush to respond. It means I'm familiar with it, she said. The phrasing was controlled, measured. It did not reveal more than necessary. It did not deny. Owen turned slightly, his free hand pressing against the edge of the desk, as if anchoring himself. This isn't a minor detail, he said. They're embedded across multiple parts of the project. Approvals are being rerouted. Decisions are being delayed. I'm aware, Caitlin replied. Another pause. The distance between them felt larger than the physical miles that separated their locations. Owen exhaled again, this time sharper. Then you understand what this is doing, he said. This isn't just procedural. It's interference. Caitlin remained by the window, her reflection steady in the glass. From your perspective, she said. The distinction landed. Owen closed his eyes briefly. What perspective would make this acceptable, he asked. Caitlin shifted her weight slightly, not out of discomfort, but to maintain balance. The one that considers the full structure, she said. Owen's grip on the phone tightened. What structure, he asked. Caitlin did not answer immediately. Instead, she moved to the table and picked up her notebook. She opened it to the most recent page, though she did not read from it. The structure that determines who has authority, she said. Who makes decisions. Who is recognized within a system and who is not. Owen frowned. This isn't theoretical, he said. This is affecting real contracts, real timelines. Yes, Caitlin said. It is. Her tone did not shift. Owen stepped away from the desk, pacing once across the room before stopping again. Caitlin, he said, his voice lowering. If you're involved in this in any way, you need to explain it. Now. The demand was direct. It was also late. Caitlin closed the notebook and set it back down. Your company's proposal was evaluated, she said. It met certain criteria. It did not meet others. Owen's expression tightened. That's not what we were told, he said. Caitlin's gaze remained steady. You were told what aligned with your position, she said. The statement did not accuse. It clarified. Owen ran a hand through his hair, the movement less controlled than the rest of his posture. Then who is making these decisions, he asked. Who has that authority? Caitlin looked at the phone in her hand for a brief moment, then back toward the window. The entity you mentioned, she said. Owen's voice sharpened. Griffin Strategic Holdings, he said. That's what you're saying. Yes. And you're familiar with it? He repeated the earlier phrasing, now insufficient. Yes. The answer did not change. On the other end of the line, something shifted in Owen's understanding, not fully formed, but enough to unsettle what he had assumed. Who owns it? He asked. The question hung there direct now, no longer circling. Caitlin did not avoid it. I do, she said. The words were delivered without emphasis. No pause before them, no explanation after. Just fact. Owen did not respond. For several seconds, the line held only the sound of his breathing, uneven, now no longer controlled. That's not possible, he said finally. Caitlin did not correct him immediately. It is, she said. Owen shook his head, though she could not see it. No, he said. You weren't. He stopped himself. The assumptions he had carried began to collapse under their own weight. Caitlin waited. When he asked the question quieter now, before she said, during, after. The answer was precise in its ambiguity. Owen pressed his hand against his forehead. This doesn't make sense, he said. You've been here, in the house, with the kids. Yes. And at the same time, yes. The confirmation came before he could finish. Owen lowered his hand. The room around him felt different. Not physically, but in the way it was now positioned relative to everything else. Why didn't you say anything, he asked. Caitlin considered the question. Would it have changed your decisions, she asked. Owen did not answer immediately. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of the moments he could now revisit, the conversations, the assumptions, the certainty with which he had spoken the night before. I don't know, he said. Caitlin nodded slightly, though he could not see it. That's accurate, she said. Owen let out a breath that did not resolve into anything stable. This is affecting my project, he said. My position, the company. Caitlin's gaze did not shift. The structure is affecting outcomes, she said. Yes. Owen's tone tightened again. You're controlling those outcomes, he said. Caitlin did not deny it. I'm influencing them, she said. The distinction mattered. To her, to the system she had built. Owen turned away from the desk again, his movements sharper now. This isn't just influence, he said. This is leverage. Caitlin did not respond. Because he was correct. The silence confirmed it. Across the city, Ethan Caldwell was already in motion. In a downtown office lined with glass and steel, he reviewed the final documents before submission. The filings were structured to establish Caitlin's position, and clearly not through declaration, but through evidence. Video, audio, time-stamped records. Each piece aligned, each piece reinforcing the others. He signed the final page and sent the package forward. The legal process, once initiated, did not require acknowledgement from those it affected. It proceeded regardless. Back in the Brooks house, Margaret stood in the doorway of the study, watching Owen as he remained on the phone. What is it, she asked. Owen did not turn. It's her, he said. Margaret's expression sharpened. What do you mean, she asked. Owen closed his eyes briefly. Griffin Strategic Holdings, he said. She owns it. The words settled into the room. Margaret did not speak immediately. Lydia, standing just behind her, let out a short breath. That's not possible, she said. Owen opened his eyes. She confirmed it, he said. Margaret stepped fully into the room now. "Put her on speaker," she said. Owen hesitated, then pressed the button. "Caitlin," he said, his voice steadier now. "My mother is here." Caitlin did not change her tone. "I assumed she would be," she said. Margaret stepped closer to the phone. "Caitlin," she said, her voice controlled, "if this is some kind of misunderstanding, it needs to be clarified immediately." Caitlin's reflection remained steady in the window. "It isn't a misunderstanding," she said. Margaret's posture did not shift. "Then explain it," she said. Caitlin did not raise her voice. "The explanation will be provided through the appropriate channels," she said. The phrasing was deliberate, legal. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. "What channels?" she asked. Caitlin's answer came without delay. "You'll be notified." The line remained open for a moment longer. Then Caitlin ended the call. In the silence that followed, 3 separate spaces held the weight of what had just been said. In the corporate residence, Caitlin set the phone down and returned to the bedroom where the triplets slept, unaware of the structures shifting around them. In the downtown office, Ethan Caldwell watched as the confirmation of filing appeared on his screen. And in the Brooks house, for the first time since the door had closed the night before, the certainty that had defined the space was gone. The notice arrived before noon, not as a conversation, not as a request, as documentation. At Brooks Infrastructure Group, the envelope was delivered to the front desk and logged without comment. Standard procedure. Certified. Time-stamped. Routed to legal, then to Owen Brooks directly because his name appeared in multiple sections of the filing. He recognized the format before he opened it. Formal, structured, final in a way that did not depend on agreement. He broke the seal carefully. Inside, the language was precise. Petition for relief, unlawful eviction, endangerment of minors, immediate request for protective orders and custodial determination. Attached exhibits, video stills, audio transcripts, written logs, each one referenced by time, date, and context. Owen read the first page, then the second. The words did not change, but their impact did. Across the table in the small conference room where he had moved to read in private, his phone vibrated continuously. Messages from colleagues, questions, requests for updates he could not provide. He set the phone face down. For the first time, the structure was no longer something he could position or interpret. It was something he had to answer. In the Brooks house, Margaret received a separate copy, delivered with the same formality. She did not open it immediately. Instead, she held it in her hand, weighing it as though the thickness of the paper might reveal something about its contents. Lydia watched from across the room. "What is it?" she asked. Margaret's gaze remained on the envelope. "It's from her," she said. The phrasing was simple. It did not require elaboration. Lydia stood. "Then open it," she said. Margaret did. The same language, the same structure, the same precision. She read silently, her expression controlled, though the stillness around her began to tighten. Lydia moved closer, reading over her shoulder. "They're accusing us of..." She stopped, scanning the next line. "This is excessive." Margaret did not respond. She turned the page. Exhibit A. A still image from a security camera across the street. Caitlin standing on the porch. 3 infants. The door open behind her. Margaret's hand holding the frame. Lydia's figure partially visible. Owen near the threshold. The timestamp clear. Margaret's grip on the paper tightened slightly. "This doesn't show context," Lydia said quickly. "It doesn't show what led up to it." Margaret continued reading. Exhibit B, audio transcript. Margaret's voice. "This arrangement is no longer sustainable." Lydia's voice. "You don't contribute." Owen's voice. "I think it's necessary." The words were exact. No interpretation, no emphasis, just record. Margaret set the page down. "This was recorded," she said. The statement was not a question. Lydia stepped back. "That's not admissible without consent," she said. Margaret looked at her. "That's not the issue right now," she replied. In the conference room, Owen reached the same section. He read the transcript slowly, line by line. His own words did not shift on the page. They remained as they had been spoken, without context, without explanation, without defense. He turned to the next page. Exhibit C, a written log, handwritten entries, dates, times, observations. No emotion, no interpretation, just sequence. Owen recognized the pattern immediately. Caitlin's handwriting. He had seen it before, on small notes left on the kitchen counter. Lists, reminders. He had never considered what it might look like when applied to something else. Now he did. Across the city, Caitlin Griffin sat in a quiet office adjacent to Ethan Caldwell's firm, not the main conference room, a smaller space. Deliberate. The triplets were not with her. Arrangements had been made for their care during the hearing. Temporary, structured. She sat with her hands resting lightly on the table, her posture unchanged from the night before, from the morning, from the months that had led to this point. Ethan reviewed the final documents in front of him. "They've received notice," he said. "We should expect a response." Caitlin nodded once. "What form?" she asked. "Initial denial," Ethan said. "Possibly an attempt to reframe the events. They may argue context, intent, necessity." Caitlin's gaze remained steady. "The record is complete," she said. "Yes," Ethan agreed. "That's what matters." There was a brief pause. "They'll also begin to connect the financial structure to this filing," he added, "if they haven't already." Caitlin did not respond, because she knew they had. At the courthouse, the preliminary hearing was scheduled with little delay. The nature of the filing required it. Protection orders involving minors moved quickly. The courtroom was not large, functional, ordered, designed for process rather than display. Caitlin entered with Ethan at her side. No announcement, no shift in the room beyond the necessary acknowledgement of presence. Owen arrived shortly after, accompanied by a representative from his company's legal team. Margaret and Lydia followed. The distance between them was not measured in space. It was defined by what each of them now understood, or did not. Owen's gaze moved to Caitlin. For a moment it held, not with certainty, with recognition, of something he had not seen before. Caitlin did not look away. She did not speak. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The process began. Names were stated, positions clarified. The language remained formal, controlled, structured, to remove emotion from the sequence of events. Ethan presented first. "Your Honor, this filing concerns the unlawful removal of my client and her 3 minor children from a primary residence without provision for their safety or continuity of care." The phrasing was precise. Each word placed. Exhibits have been submitted documenting the event, including video, audio, and contemporaneous written records. The judge nodded once. "Proceed." Ethan did. He did not raise his voice. He did not dramatize. He referenced Exhibit A, displayed. The still image appeared on the screen. Caitlin on the porch, the infants, the open door, then closed. Exhibit B, audio. Played in the room. Margaret's voice, Lydia's voice, Owen's voice. Unchanged, unfiltered. Exhibit C, the log, presented as a sequence. No gaps, no additions, just continuity. Across the room, Margaret remained still. Lydia's posture shifted slightly. Owen's gaze did not leave the screen. When Ethan finished, he stepped back. The judge turned to the opposing side. Response: Owen's legal representative stood. "Your Honor, while the events depicted are not disputed in their occurrence, we contend that the context surrounding them has not been fully represented." The argument began where Ethan had expected. Context, intent, necessity. Margaret's voice appeared again, not in the recording, in explanation. "We were concerned for the stability of the household," she said through her counsel. The arrangement had become untenable. The judge listened, not interrupting, not reacting. When the statement concluded, the judge turned back to the exhibits. "The evidence presented reflects a removal without provision," she said. "Do you contest that?" There was a pause. Owen's representative hesitated. "We acknowledge that alternative arrangements were not immediately in place," he said. The phrasing did not resolve the issue. It confirmed it. Caitlin remained seated, her expression unchanged. No reaction to the words spoken around her. No shift in posture. Because the process did not require it. The record spoke. And in that room, for the first time, the narrative was no longer controlled by those who had assumed they held it. The courtroom did not change its pace. It did not accelerate to match the tension building beneath the surface. It did not slow to accommodate hesitation. The process continued as it was designed to measured and precise each step, following the last without deviation. Caitlin Griffin remained seated, her posture unchanged, her hands resting lightly against the table in front of her. Across from her, Owen Brooks stood beside his legal representative, his expression held in place by effort rather than certainty. The judge reviewed the exhibits once more. Then she looked up. "Before I proceed," she said, "I need clarification on one point raised in the submitted documentation." Ethan Caldwell stepped forward slightly. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's gaze shifted briefly to the file in front of her. "There is reference here." She continued to a financial structure that may be relevant to both the stability of the petitioner and the broader context of this case. The room adjusted, not visibly, but in the way attention narrowed. Ethan nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe it is relevant." The judge looked toward Owen's side of the room. "Is this contested?" she asked. Owen's legal representative hesitated. "We were not previously aware of the full scope of that information," he said carefully. The phrasing did not deny it. It acknowledged absence. The judge turned back to Ethan. "Proceed," she said. Ethan did not move quickly. He reached for a separate folder distinct from the exhibits already presented. The documents inside were structured differently. Less narrative, more definitive. "Your Honor," he said, "the petitioner has, for an extended period of time, maintained independent professional activity within the field of contract analysis and infrastructure investment." Owen's gaze shifted. Margaret's posture remained still. Lydia's attention sharpened. Ethan continued. "This activity has resulted in the successful negotiation and execution of a contract with Halverson Capital Partners valued at $500 million. The number entered the room without emphasis. It did not require it. Silence followed. Not disbelief, not confusion, a recalibration. Owen's expression changed first. Not dramatically, but enough. The certainty that had defined his posture since the beginning of the hearing fractured. Margaret's gaze moved briefly toward Caitlin. Lydia did not speak. Ethan placed the document on the table in front of the judge. "Documentation confirming this agreement has been submitted," he said, "including verification of ownership through Griffin Strategic Holdings." The name was spoken clearly, not introduced, confirmed. Across the room, Owen's hand tightened slightly at his side. The connection was no longer theoretical. It was explicit. The judge reviewed the document. Her expression did not shift, but her attention deepened. "Is this contested?" she asked again, this time directing the question toward Owen's side. Owen's legal representative did not respond immediately. He glanced at Owen. Owen did not answer. Not because he refused, because he could not. The evidence did not allow for denial. "No, Your Honor," the representative said finally. The acknowledgment settled. Ethan continued. "In addition to the contract itself, the petitioner has established a series of financial positions within entities connected to the respondent's business operations. These positions, while not overtly controlling, provide measurable influence over approval processes and decision-making structures." He did not elaborate further. He did not need to. The implication was clear. The structure that Owen had encountered that morning, the delays, the revised approvals, the name he had not recognized, all of it aligned. Owen looked at Caitlin again. This time the recognition was not partial. It was complete. Not of who she had been in the house, but of who she had been the entire time. Caitlin met his gaze. There was no expression of victory, no shift in posture, just presence. The judge set the document down. "The court recognizes the petitioner's independent financial capacity," she said. "This materially affects the assessment of stability and provision." The language was neutral. Its impact was not. Margaret's hand moved slightly, resting against the edge of the table. Lydia's composure thinned further. Owen remained still. Ethan stepped back. The presentation was complete. The record had been established. On the opposing side, the legal representative attempted to recover ground. "Your Honor," he said, "while we acknowledge the petitioner's financial position, we maintain that the events in question were not intended to cause harm, but to address a situation perceived as unsustainable." The argument returned to intent, to framing, to interpretation. The judge listened, then responded. "Intent does not negate outcome," she said. "The removal of the petitioner and 3 minor children from their residence without immediate provision is not mitigated by subsequent rationale." The statement closed that avenue. Owen's representative adjusted his approach. "We request consideration of shared custody," he said, "and an opportunity to establish appropriate arrangements moving forward." The shift was subtle, from defense to negotiation. The timing was not lost on anyone in the room. Ethan responded. "Your Honor, given the documented actions and the current stability provided by the petitioner, we request primary custody with limited supervised access pending further review." The phrasing was exact, not excessive, not minimal, aligned with the evidence. The judge considered both positions. The room remained still. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Inside, the structure reached its highest point, not in volume, in clarity. After a moment, the judge spoke. "The court will issue a preliminary order," she said. "Pending full review, primary custody will remain with the petitioner. Supervised visitation may be arranged through appropriate channels." The words were delivered without emphasis. They did not need it. Owen did not react immediately. Margaret's posture did not change. Lydia looked down briefly, then back up. Caitlin remained still. The judge continued. "Further hearings will address additional matters, including financial considerations and long-term arrangements." The process was not complete, but the direction was set. The gavel did not strike loudly. It did not need to. The decision had already settled. People began to move. Chairs shifting, papers gathered, voices returning at a lower volume, controlled, contained. Owen remained where he was for a moment longer. Then he stepped forward, not toward the judge, toward Caitlin. He stopped at a distance that did not cross into her space. "I didn't know," he said. The words were simple, unstructured. Caitlin looked at him. "I know," she said. There was no accusation in it, no relief, just acknowledgement. Owen's gaze dropped briefly, then lifted again. "This didn't have to," he began. Caitlin did not let him finish. "It did," she said. Not sharply, not emotionally, precisely. The statement did not invite further discussion. Owen did not continue. Margaret approached next. Her posture remained composed, but the certainty that had defined it before was no longer intact. "You should have said something," she said. Caitlin met her gaze. "You would have heard it differently," she replied. Margaret did not respond, because she could not dispute it. Lydia remained where she was. For once, she did not speak. Caitlin gathered her documents, not hurried, not delayed. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. No one followed. No one stopped her. The structure that had once contained her no longer existed. And she did not look back to confirm it. The courthouse emptied in measured increments. There was no single moment when it became quiet. Instead, the sound receded in layers. Conversations softened. Footsteps thinned. Doors opened and closed with less frequency until the building returned to its usual controlled stillness. Caitlin Griffin stepped outside without altering her pace. The air was cooler than it had been earlier in the day, carrying the faint echo of movement from the street beyond. Cars passed. People continued along their own routes, unaware of what had just been decided inside. Ethan Caldwell walked beside her for a short distance. "The preliminary order is in effect immediately," he said. "We'll receive the written confirmation within the hour." Caitlin nodded once. "And the next steps?" she asked. "Financial review extended custody hearing potential settlement discussions," Ethan replied. "They may attempt to negotiate now that the position is clear." Caitlin did not respond immediately. "They will," she said after a moment. Ethan glanced at her. "Do you intend to engage?" he asked. Caitlin looked ahead, her gaze steady. "I intend to follow the process," she said. The answer was precise. It did not commit beyond what was necessary. Ethan accepted it. "That's sufficient," he said. "I'll coordinate everything from here." They reached the edge of the sidewalk where their paths would separate. "I'll be in contact," he added. Caitlin inclined her head slightly. Then she continued on. Back at the Brooks house, the structure of the afternoon had not settled. Margaret Brooks stood in the center of the living room, the same space where decisions had been made the night before, though the balance within it had shifted beyond recognition. Lydia remained near the window, her phone in her hand, though she had not used it for several minutes. Owen entered last. The door closed behind him with more force than intended. No one spoke immediately. The silence was different now, not controlled, not deliberate, uncertain. Margaret broke it first. "This is not final," she said. The statement was immediate, structured as reassurance, though it carried more insistence than confidence. "It's preliminary," Lydia added, though her tone lacked the sharpness it had held before. "There will be further hearings." Owen did not move further into the room. He remained near the door, his hand still resting against the frame. "They recognized it," he said. Margaret turned toward him, recognized what she asked. The structure, Owen replied. The contract, the ownership. The words did not need expansion. Margaret's expression tightened slightly. "That doesn't negate the circumstances," she said. "It reframes them." Owen shook his head once. "It doesn't just reframe them," he said. "It changes them." The distinction mattered. Margaret did not respond immediately. Lydia stepped forward. "So we adjust," she said. "We reposition. This isn't over." Her words were quick, searching for stability in motion. Owen looked at her. "This isn't something you reposition," he said. The certainty in his voice had changed, not gone, but altered. Margaret moved toward the table and placed her hand against it, grounding herself in the familiar surface. "They'll push for settlement," she said. "They always do." Owen did not argue, because she was correct. But the implication was no longer simple. "Then we consider it," Lydia said. Margaret's gaze shifted to her. Carefully, she replied. Across the city, Caitlin returned to the corporate residence. The door closed behind her with the same controlled motion as before, though the space she entered was no longer transitional. It had become a point of continuity. The triplets were in the bedroom, their presence steady, unchanged by the events of the day. Caitlin moved toward them first. Not the table, not the phone, the room. She checked each child in turn, adjusting blankets, placing her hand lightly against their backs to confirm what she already knew. Stable, present, safe. Only after that did she return to the living area. Her phone rested where she had left it. 3 new messages, 1 from Ethan. Order confirmed. Documentation attached. 1 from the bank. Phase 3 transfer initiated. 1 from an unknown number. Caitlin opened the first. The order was clear. Primary custody. Supervised visitation. Effective immediately. No ambiguity. She closed the document. Then opened the second. The transfer confirmation aligned with the earlier timeline. The final phase had begun. She did not open the third message. Instead, she set the phone down and sat at the table. For a moment, she did nothing. Not because there was nothing to do, because the sequence required a pause, not for reflection, for alignment. Her notebook lay open beside her. The last entry remained visible. Contract confirmed. Legal process initiated. She picked up the pen, added a new line. Hearing completed. Preliminary order granted. No additional commentary. No interpretation. Just record. She closed the notebook. The phone buzzed again. This time, she answered. Ethan's voice came through immediately. "They've requested a meeting," he said. "Informal, their legal team." Caitlin leaned back slightly in her chair. When she asked, "Tomorrow morning," he replied. "They want to discuss settlement terms." Caitlin considered the timing. Expected. "They'll aim to reduce exposure," Ethan continued, "financially and publicly." Caitlin did not respond immediately. "Then we attend," she said. Ethan paused briefly. "And your position?" he asked. Caitlin's gaze moved toward the window. The city lights had begun to shift into evening patterns. More defined, more contained. "My position is the record," she said. Ethan did not ask for clarification. He did not need to. "I'll prepare accordingly," he said. The call ended. Caitlin remained seated, not waiting, not anticipating, simply present. Across the city, Owen sat alone in the study. The documents from the hearing lay open in front of him. He had read them more than once. Each time the words remained the same, unchanged, unyielding. His phone rested beside them. The message thread with Caitlin remained open. No new messages, no responses. He did not type. Because there was nothing left to ask that had not already been answered. Downstairs, Margaret and Lydia continued their discussion. Strategies, possibilities, approaches that might restore some version of what had been lost. Owen did not join them, because the structure they were trying to rebuild no longer existed in the form they remembered. Back in the corporate residence, Caitlin stood. She moved through the room, adjusting small details that did not require adjustment. A bottle placed slightly to the left. A document aligned with the edge of the table. Movements that restored order, not because it was absent, but because it was hers to define. In the bedroom, one of the triplets shifted. Caitlin entered quietly and stood beside the crib. The child settled again without waking. Caitlin remained there for a moment longer. Then she turned off the light and stepped back into the living area. The phone remained silent. For now. The process was still moving, not loudly, not visibly, but with a direction that no longer depended on anyone else's control. Morning came with a clarity that did not announce itself. Caitlin Griffin woke before the light fully settled into the room. The city outside had already begun its routine. But inside the corporate residence, the space remained still defined by the quiet rhythm she had established. The triplets stirred one by one. Caitlin moved between them with the same steady precision, her motions unchanged by the outcome of the hearing, by the messages that had followed, by the structures now set in motion beyond the walls of the room. Nothing about her pace suggested urgency. Nothing about it suggested hesitation. The day would proceed as it needed to. After the children were settled again, she prepared for the meeting, not with visible adjustment, not with rehearsed statements, with alignment. Her documents were already organized. The legal framework was in place. The financial structure had moved beyond activation into execution. What remained was not preparation. It was presence. At Ethan Caldwell's office, the conference room had been arranged before either side arrived. Neutral space, glass walls, minimal distraction. Ethan stood near the table reviewing the final notes as Caitlin entered. "They're already here," he said quietly. Caitlin nodded once. Understood. On the other side of the table, Owen Brooks sat with his legal representative. Margaret Brooks sat beside him. Her posture composed, her expression controlled, but no longer absolute. Lydia remained slightly behind, her position less defined than before, her presence quieter. No one stood when Caitlin entered, not out of disrespect, out of uncertainty. Caitlin took her seat. Ethan sat beside her. The structure of the room settled. No one spoke immediately. Then Owen's legal representative began. "We appreciate your willingness to meet," he said, his tone measured. "Our goal today is to explore a resolution that addresses the concerns raised while minimizing further escalation." The phrasing was expected. Caitlin listened, not interrupting, not responding. The representative continued. "Given the circumstances, we are prepared to discuss financial compensation, structured support, and revised custody arrangements that reflect the best interests of all parties involved." Ethan did not respond immediately. He allowed the words to settle. Then he turned slightly toward Caitlin. She did not move, did not signal, did not redirect. Ethan spoke. "Our position is defined by the record," he said. "Any resolution must align with the findings already established and the ongoing legal process." The response did not reject. It did not accept. It clarified. Owen leaned forward slightly. "We're not trying to avoid responsibility," he said. The statement came directly from him, not through counsel. Caitlin looked at him, her gaze steady. "I understand," she said. The words were not conciliatory. They were accurate. Owen held her gaze for a moment longer. "This doesn't have to continue like this," he said. "There's room to adjust." Caitlin did not look away. "The structure is already in motion," she said. The phrasing was familiar, deliberate. Margaret spoke next. "We can reach an agreement that reflects your current position," she said. "Financially, legally. There's no need to extend this further." Caitlin considered the statement, not for its content, for its timing. "The process will proceed," she said. Her tone did not change. Margaret's expression tightened slightly. "That may not be necessary," she replied. Caitlin met her gaze. "It is," she said. The exchange ended there. Not because it had resolved anything, because it had clarified everything. The legal representative shifted again. "Then perhaps we focus on specifics," he said, "terms that can be agreed upon within that process." Ethan nodded once. "We can review proposals," he said, "but the baseline remains unchanged." The conversation continued. Figures were mentioned, structures outlined, custody frameworks discussed. Each point raised, each point met with the same response. Alignment with a record. No deviation, no escalation. Time moved, not quickly, not slowly, measured. At the end, no final agreement was reached, not because it was impossible, because it was not yet necessary. The meeting concluded without conclusion. Papers gathered, chairs shifted, voices lowered. Owen remained seated for a moment after the others began to stand. Then he looked at Caitlin. "This isn't what I expected," he said. Caitlin did not respond immediately. "Then it wasn't meant to be," she said. The answer did not invite further explanation. Owen nodded once, not in agreement, in recognition. Margaret stood. She did not speak again. Lydia followed. The room emptied in stages, until only Caitlin and Ethan remained. Ethan closed his folder. "They'll continue," he said. "Yes," Caitlin replied. "And so will we." Caitlin nodded. "Of course." Outside, the city moved as it always did. Inside the corporate residence, the afternoon light shifted across the floor. Caitlin returned without delay. The door closed behind her. The space remained as she had left it. Ordered. Defined. The triplets were awake now, their movements small, their presence steady. Caitlin moved to them first. She lifted one, then another, then the third. The routine resumed, not as repetition, as continuity. Days passed, not marked by events, by structure. The legal process continued, filings submitted, responses received, hearings scheduled. Each step followed the last, without interruption, without deviation. Owen adapted, not completely, not immediately, but in increments. The project he had once defined his position by no longer moved under his control. The structure had shifted beyond his reach. The consequences extended beyond the hearing, beyond the house, beyond what he had anticipated. Margaret adjusted her approach. Not in tone, in direction. The certainty remained. The outcome did not. Lydia spoke less, observed more. The patterns she had relied on no longer held. Across the city, Caitlin did not return to the past. She did not revisit the house, did not reframe what had happened. The record existed. That was sufficient. Her work continued. Not hidden, not displayed, integrated. The structure she had built expanded where it needed to, held where it did not. The triplets grew, not in a way that marked time loudly, but in small, consistent shifts. Weight, movement, recognition, Caitlin observed, recorded, present. One evening, as the light dimmed and the room settled into quiet, she stood by the window. The city beyond remained unchanged, or appeared to be. Her phone rested on the table behind her, silent. No immediate messages, no urgent calls. The process had reached a point where it no longer required constant adjustment. It would continue, with or without attention. Caitlin did not turn away from the window immediately. She remained there for a moment longer, not reflecting, not anticipating, simply present. Then she returned to the room. The children slept. The documents remained in place. The structure held. And she moved forward within it, without announcement, without hesitation, without the need to look back. In the end, nothing about Caitlin Griffin's story unfolded the way it was expected to. Not because she forced it to change, but because she never allowed herself to be defined by what others assumed she was. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue for recognition. She simply continued observing, documenting, and acting, only when the structure was ready to hold her truth. There is a kind of strength that does not need to be seen in the moment it exists. It does not announce itself or demand acknowledgement. It waits, it records. And when the time comes, it aligns everything with quiet precision. What happened in that house was not undone by anger or revenge, but by process, by clarity, by the simple fact that actions once taken do not disappear just because they are no longer convenient. If you've followed this story until now, you've already understood something many overlook. That silence is not always weakness, and that justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives exactly when it is ready. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to share where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Your presence here matters more than you might think. And if you believe in stories that unfold with patience, clarity, and truth, you're welcome to stay and follow along for more.